She wasn't a stranger, not really. She went to class, rode the same buses, used the same apps everyone else used. No one ever had a reason to look closer, but something was wrong. And by the time anyone figured it out, 58 people were already part of it. It didn't happen all at once. It took months. Quiet meetings, quick choices, one after the other. No one asked questions. She didn't offer answers. What followed wasn't loud. It didn't make headlines at first. It moved in silence until someone noticed a pattern that shouldn't have existed. Her name is Mariella Quinn, and what she left behind is not just a list of names. It's a long trail of people still trying to understand what really happened. This is how it started. If stories like this matter to you, take a second to like the video and subscribe. It helps more than you think, and it keeps these stories from being forgotten. Mariella Quinn grew up in Elmsfield, a quiet town where most people kept to themselves. It was the kind of place where changes came slowly, and lives played out in full view, but rarely in full detail. Her home sat on the edge of town, behind a crooked fence in a yard no one bothered to mow. Her mother was gone before she learned to speak full sentences. Some said she left for work. Others said she never planned to stay. Mariella never got a clear answer, and no one around her offered one. She lived with her grandmother, Ruth, a retired nurse with a stiff back and stricter habits. Ruth wasn't unkind, but she wasn't warm either. Meals were regular. School was required. Emotion, if it ever showed up, was expected to stay quiet. There were no loud arguments in the house, no special days, no softness. At school, Mariella kept her head down. She didn't stand out in class photos. She was never called on stage. Teachers described her as polite, reserved, capable. She spoke when spoken to. She got average grades. She walked home alone. And somehow, she seemed to fade into the background even when she was sitting right in front of people. She wasn't disliked. She just wasn't noticed. At 16, she entered her first relationship. It didn't last long. A boy 2 years older, charming in public, sharp in private. He told her she was lucky to have his attention. When she asked for space, he disappeared. When she stayed quiet, he came closer. He wasn't violent. He didn't need to be. He used silence like a wall and pressure like a tool. When he left, he didn't look back. By 17, Mariella had been to 3 health clinics. She never told anyone why. At the last one, she was given a diagnosis: genital herpes. She sat alone in a small room while the nurse explained a treatment plan without making eye contact. There was no one to call, no one waiting for her outside. She walked home, washed her hands 5 times, and said nothing. Her world didn't collapse in one moment. It faded slowly, each day a little harder than the last. School continued. Her grandmother never noticed a change. No one asked why she stopped smiling in photos or why she sat near the exit in every room. She never told the boy. She never told anyone. And somewhere in that silence, something hardened. After the diagnosis, Mariella didn't speak to anyone about it. The nurse gave her a name, some printed pages, and a prescription. That was all. There was no talk about how to live with it. No questions asked when she left the clinic. At home, no one noticed the small white bag she kept hidden in a drawer. She felt cut off. The kind of isolation that didn't show on the outside. In class, she stopped raising her hand. She kept her head down. People talked, laughed, made jokes she used to understand. Now, everything sounded far away. Like she'd been moved out of the room, even while sitting in it. No one said anything cruel to her face. They didn't have to. The silence was enough. Her grandmother didn't ask. Mariella didn't offer. Instead, she turned to her phone. At first, it was just searching, reading articles, looking for facts, but the facts didn't help. They felt cold, medical, distant. So she kept scrolling until she found people who weren't explaining, just venting, hidden spaces, old message boards, anonymous posts with words that sounded familiar, frustration, blame, quiet anger. She didn't say much, but she kept going back, reading more, staying longer. Something was changing, not fast, not loud, but real. Mariella didn't feel like going out that night, but saying no would raise questions she didn't want to answer, so she went. It was a small party, not loud, not crowded. Just a few people from school gathered at someone's house. The lights were low. Music played quietly from someone's phone. Most people stuck to the kitchen and the living room. She stood off to the side, drink in hand, watching. Not fully present, but not invisible either. That's when she noticed him. He wasn't loud or trying too hard. Just easy to talk to. He smiled when he spoke, and didn't push when she paused. They talked for a while, simple things, nothing deep. She didn't expect to feel anything, but for the first time in months, someone was looking at her without suspicion or pity. He asked if she wanted to leave. She didn't think. She said yes. The ride to his place was quiet. She didn't say much, neither did he. When they arrived, everything happened naturally. There was no pressure, no rush, just silence and soft light. She never mentioned what she was living with. She could have, but she didn't. And he didn't ask. The next morning, she walked home alone. The streets were empty. The sun had just come up. She kept going over the night in her head. Not because she regretted it, but because she wasn't sure how to feel at all. The guilt came later. It was there, but it didn't take over. It didn't sting or scream. It sat quietly, just under the surface. She waited to feel something worse. Shame, fear, panic. But those things didn't come. What did come was a kind of calm. For months, she'd felt trapped, like everything in her life was shrinking. But now, for just one night, she had done something no one else controlled. It wasn't about hurting someone. It wasn't planned. It just happened. And that scared her more than anything, because the silence that followed didn't feel like a warning. It felt like permission. He went on with his life. She saw him at school a few days later. Nothing about him had changed. He smiled the same way, talked to his friends like nothing had happened. And no one looked at her any differently. No one knew. And for Mariella, that changed everything. After that first night, something shifted. What started as a single moment, quiet, uncertain, became something else. Mariella didn't tell anyone what happened. She didn't need to. She had already made a decision, quietly, internally. No big turn, no dramatic plan, just a slow slide into a pattern she didn't try to stop. She became more cautious, but also more distant. She started using fake names. Not always, just sometimes. She met people through dating apps, college mixers, parties in nearby towns, places where she could disappear after one night, where no one knew who she was or where she came from. It wasn't about connection anymore. She didn't look for chemistry or comfort. She kept things short. She'd talk enough to keep their interest, then leave before anything could grow. Most of them described her later the same way: cold, hard to read, maybe too quiet, or strangely intense. There was something they couldn't put their finger on. Something off, but not enough to raise alarm. She didn't see them again. That was the pattern. 1 became 3. 3 became 6. 6 became 12. No one linked the cases. The names weren't shared. The towns didn't talk to each other. Each person thought it was bad luck, a misstep. No one imagined there was a reason. The count kept rising, 19 by the end of the year. Quiet numbers. People who didn't know each other. People who didn't know her name. One said he remembered her face but couldn't describe it clearly. He thought he'd offended her somehow. She never looked at him after it was over. Another said she spoke very little but asked odd questions, things that didn't make sense at the time, like whether he believed people deserved second chances. He answered yes. She didn't reply. A third remembered only her eyes, said they felt empty. He thought she was going through something but didn't ask. No one suspected her, because no one imagined someone could do this on purpose. It was Elliot Rowe who first started asking questions. He was 22, in school part-time and working a retail job. Nothing about him stood out. He didn't think of himself as someone who made trouble or looked for it. But a few weeks after meeting someone through a dating app, he started noticing symptoms. At first, he thought it was a one-time thing, bad luck. But something didn't sit right. He remembered how strange she was, how she spoke in half-thoughts and never asked him anything personal. She never gave a last name, didn't link any social accounts, and by morning, she was gone. When he went to the clinic, the nurse gave him a few pamphlets, explained the basics, and moved on. But Elliot couldn't. Something stayed with him, a feeling he couldn't shake. He started searching online, quietly, carefully. He wasn't ready to post, so he read. Forums, message boards, subreddits, anywhere people talked about things they were too embarrassed to say out loud. And then he saw something. Someone else had posted about a strange encounter. The user was anonymous, but their story matched his almost word for word. Same vague name, same silence after, same timing. Elliot responded. In private messages, they compared what little they remembered. Soon, another person joined, then another. A pattern was forming. The locations were different, but the timeline was too specific to ignore. College campuses, house parties, late-night meetings through apps that didn't require real names, and always the same details. She spoke very little, stayed distant, and never came back. Eventually, someone said her name, Mariella. That was the first time Elliot saw it written anywhere. A few of the others recognized it. One of them had gone to school with her years ago. Another had a mutual friend. Her photo wasn't public anywhere, but people started sharing descriptions, piecing together scraps. The whispers moved from forums to Discord chats, then local threads, subreddits that focused on health, relationships, and campus news started noticing strange overlaps. Mariella wasn't a ghost anymore. She was a profile, a timeline, a name. What started as quiet posts became longer threads, each one confirming more than the last. She hadn't stopped. She was still active. And suddenly, it wasn't just a few people talking in private anymore. It was a storm, and it was growing louder. Elliot decided to speak up. He didn't go to the police first. He went back to the clinic, showed the thread, and asked if they'd seen anything similar. The nurse told him to contact someone else. It took days before anyone listened, but slowly others followed. Quiet emails, phone calls with no names, short statements. One by one, the stories matched up. Different places, same pattern. At first, police didn't take it seriously. It sounded like rumor, an online story getting out of hand. But the reports kept coming. A few were from different cities, others from nearby towns. The names and dates lined up. A public health investigator heard about the post through a flagged online report. She began her own review. No press, no alerts, just files, test dates, clinic logs, and a handful of people describing the same woman with different names. It was enough to build a case. Mariella was traced through one of the apps, an account tied to an old email. The username had changed, but the activity hadn't. She was found at a small rental outside town, alone. The officer who brought her in said she didn't resist, didn't run. She sat quietly, listening, as they listed what had been shared. When they asked if she had anything to say, she only gave one line. "I warned them not to get close." No emotion, no explanation, nothing more. The news spread quickly, not just through headlines but in whispers, text chains, late-night phone calls. People were shocked, confused, and divided. Some called Mariella a threat. Others said she was sick and needed help. The town, once quiet, became split. Old classmates posted vague memories. Parents warned their kids. The story reached bigger outlets, then national ones. Her trial wasn't about taking a life. It was about endangerment, about knowingly putting others at risk. The charges reflected what the law could handle: criminal transmission of an infectious disease and reckless conduct. In court, she rarely looked up. Her lawyers kept the focus on her background: no support, no therapy, a young person left alone with something she didn't know how to carry. Mental health experts testified. They spoke of trauma, of untreated emotional pain, of isolation that went unnoticed for years. One said she had been emotionally frozen since her first diagnosis, that she had become disconnected from what her choices really meant. But the facts remained. Dozens of confirmed cases, many more suspected, and a long timeline that showed intent. The sentence followed the law: years in state prison, plus mandatory treatment. It didn't please everyone. Some said it was too much. Others, not enough. What lingered wasn't the verdict. It was the question: how could this go on so long without anyone seeing it? Mariella Quinn is still in custody. She hasn't spoken publicly. No apology has ever been issued. Those who knew her say she keeps to herself. The people she encountered, some diagnosed, some never tested, carried different versions of the same pain. Some got help. Some didn't. A few spoke out, but most chose privacy. The damage wasn't loud. It didn't make headlines every day. It lived quietly, in doctor visits, changed relationships, and unanswered questions. And the bigger question remains: what if someone had paid attention earlier? What if someone had asked the right questions? Would it have made a difference? Some say yes. Others aren't sure. But no one forgets. Because some harm doesn't show up right away. It spreads slowly, quietly. And once it's noticed, it's already deep. Not every wound bleeds. Some grow quietly, inside people who feel invisible. Mariella Quinn didn't choose what happened to her. But once it happened, she chose to carry it a certain way. And in doing so, others were made to carry it too. If you stayed with us through this story, thank you. We don't tell these stories to scare, but to understand. If you believe stories like this matter, stories about silence, about hurt, about choices, please like, share, and subscribe. That's how we keep asking the harder questions, and how we keep telling the truth, even when it's hard.